So this is a block we're going to be making today. If we make 12 of them, it'll make a nice lap size quilt, which is what I'm going to be doing. The first thing I'm going to do, I am using some scraps that I have. So these are 2.5 by 4.5. These were 5 inches that I've cut down to 4.5. And with these, what I'm doing now is I'm actually going to chain piece these together. So these are 2.5 inch squares with 2.5 inch squares. So let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. I don't know if you can see this very well. I did get all these chain piece. Now I'm going to do the block and the background. The easiest to do them two up in 5 inch by 2.5 inch strips. So right sides together, then just chain piece them. So feed them one after the other through the sewing machine. Then press them open and cut them in half to 2.5 inches. Well, actually it's not in half, I'll be trimming them down. And chain piecing just makes it so much easier when you're doing multiple blocks. Let me do that and I will be right back. Okay, now that we have these all sewn together, what we need to do is subcut them or trim them down so that they are 4.5 inches this way and 2.5 inches this way. There's a little bit of extra fabric built in this direction so that you can make that perfect cut. So the way to trim these down is you want the 2 1/4 mark to be on the seam you printed or you stitched, and then this should line up at 2 1/4 here and 4.5. This one I'll need to trim down because I did use a jelly roll that was slightly larger, so I will trim here, and then I can cut at 2.5 and then trim these up nicely. So I will go ahead and do that. I've got a little stack to do. And then also to keep me busy, I have a good chunk of my 2-up bars done. And these I will press open and then get ready to place them in the blocks. So let me carry on and I will be back. Okay, now that I have the block and the background sewn together, I'm not going to break the thread and I'm just going to continue piecing. So what I'm going to do is take my 2.5 by 4.5 inch strips and sew them together on the longest side, so on the 4.5 inch side, using a 1/4 inch seam. We need to have 36 sets of 2, so that's 72 pieces of fabric. So I'm just going to carry on. I've got all this to work through. I am going to randomly put them together and try not to have light colors beside each other. So I will do that and then I'll be right back. Okay, next up we get to do some more string piecing. So what we need to do is make 12 that have the blue or whatever color you choose, and then another 36 that have the black. These are the 2 sets that we made just a little bit ago, and then these are trimmed down background to 2.5 by 4.5. These should measure 2.5, 4.5. Same with this. So right sides together, 1/4 inch seam, and if you have them set up in piles by your sewing machine, you can just zip through them, cut them apart, press them open, and you're all done. So I'm just going to take care of that and I'll be back shortly. So all the corners are now sewn together. So what I've done is I've stacked them in each corner in piles. I've got the strip sets of the bricks here, here, and here as blocks all done. All of these blocks should now measure 4.5 square, and now it's time to join them together. So what I've done is I've just piled them in the order they'll appear in the final block, and I'm just gonna either sew across or sew down, and then I'll do that 12 times and then I'll be back. It should take a little bit, so take your time, check your seams. When you go to press, if you're doing in pairs, try to have your seams pressed in opposite directions so that they're easier to nest together. I'd really like to know how you feel this went. Anyway, let me do that and I'll be back in a bit. So far it took me about 20 minutes and I've got these groups of 3 sewn together and then these 2s. So what I'm going to do next is sew these piles together and then add the 3rd, and this is where your pressing becomes important. The good thing about this pattern, you don't really have to worry about a lot of intersections, so none of the chips line up, so that keeps it simple. So I'm going to go back, sew these together, and then I'll be right back. Just showing you that I am down to the last part of joining all the blocks together. So these groupings are all neatly done. Now it's just this one seam, and then this block will be done as well. So I have, I think, another 10 to do, and then we can start playing around with the final layout. I'll be back to show you what I come up with. Okay, just showing you the layout I've decided to do for this. I added one more square, so it's actually 13 that need to be made. I will be adding cornerstones and the set or corner triangles, which are the ones in the corner, and then also the triangles that set the sides. I will put the measurements for those in the notes or slide. So stick around with me while I get this sewn together. I'm just showing you how to put the 45-degree corner on. What you want to do is line it up after the side triangles are already sewn into position. These were done by having the edges lined up down here, and then this is going to be, if you pretend that this goes like this, that'll be the corner. So what you want to do is have your corners or your edges lined up on the top, and then the point is actually going to meet where 2 of the seams are in one of the block, the center seam. And when you have that all in position, then you pin it and then you sew it 1/4 inch along here. You have to remember you are sewing on the bias, so it is going to be a bit stretchy. I try to pin it as much as I can so that it doesn't distort. So I'll carry on and I'll check back with you in a bit. Okay, now that the corner and side triangles are cut out, I have them up on the design board, just showing you quickly what they'll look like. So now the final assembly of the pieces comes together. This will go very quickly. You just pick a seam and join from one end to the other. pressing as you go so that you can nest your seams, make it so much easier. And by doing the corners at the end of each row and lining them up, it makes it very easy. I'll show you once I'm all done. We're almost there.